Hello, true crimers, it's Jay again, and I am back with a solved true crime case for you all. We are on case number 16 now, and the case that I have today is a very interesting one that I know not a lot of other true crime YouTubers have covered. As always, I will now go ahead and put up my disclaimer. I will be talking a lot about gun violence in today's case. If any of you ever watch the news, then you know that this country has a horrifying issue with gun violence and mass shootings. Every other day, it seems like there's been another shooting that has happened. So many innocent lives are taken every year due to gun violence. It's so bad here in the United States that I honestly don't know how it will ever get any better. I don't have the answers on how to make this violence stop. I wish anyone had the answer to end all this mindless bullshit. The case I am covering today does involve a hostage situation at a high school, and all of this happened in 1994, and yet there has been no progress whatsoever after almost 30 years with preventing school or public shootings, and that's absolutely terrifying. Thankfully, with this case, no one at the high school was harmed, but the entire immediate family of the person who was responsible were not as lucky. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and if you want to check out my other 15 cases, they are available on my playlist, which I will leave a link down below. But let's get into this case. This is the case of the Shrout family murders. Walter Harvey Shrout, born on October 25th, 1950, and Rebecca Johnson Shrout, born on January 17th, 1950, who went by the name Becky, quickly became college sweethearts when they both attended Georgetown College together in the late 1960s. They got married quickly after graduating from college and seemed to have made a very happy life together. In their mid-20s in 1977, they had their first child, their only son, Clay Nathaniel Shrout, who I will only refer to as CS for the remainder of this video. Within the next few years, Walter and Becky had two more children together, daughters Kristen Elizabeth Shrout, born on May 13, 1980, and Lauren Rebecca Shrout, born on March 14, 1982. The Shrout family were an upper-class family who lived in a comfortable two-story suburban home on Tiburon Drive in Florence, Kentucky. They were well known and very active within their community. Their home on Tiburon Drive had a pool out back, beautiful flower beds in the front of their house. They filled their home with beloved pets. They had a black Labrador retriever named Cleo, a poodle named Lady. They also had a pet gerbil, and even two horses. Walter and Becky brought up their three children in a religious household. They were active members of the Florence Christian Church and would attend every Sunday service together as the children grew up. Walter and Becky, by all accounts from the people who knew them, were a kind couple and were great parents to all of their children. The Shrouts were known as being a stable family with no known abuse, dysfunction, or any other significant problems. Walter and Becky may have been a little bit more morally strict with their children than maybe the average family, but they also encouraged all of their kids to pursue any interest they had, whether it was with sports or with musical instruments or really anything creative that they enjoyed. Walter and Becky loved all three of their kids and only wanted to give them the best of everything. Kristen and Lauren were involved with gymnastics and rode the family's horses in shows together. Lauren, the youngest child, also started playing the xylophone in her school's band. Everyone that looked at the Shrouts believed they seemed to be the perfect, well-rounded family. All three of the Shrout children were described as nice, well-behaved, and bright, with endless potential to be and achieve anything they would have wanted to. No one would have guessed that the Shrout's oldest child, at just 17 years old, would murder his entire family in cold blood. Growing up, CS was described as a very quiet, respectful boy. He was also incredibly smart with an IQ of 161. He did mostly keep to himself, but he wasn't a loner since he did have a few friends he would frequently hang out with as he grew up. His teachers and peers described how bright he was. He began taking more advanced classes from a very young age, and he always received the best grades in every class he participated in. From the outside, he seemed to be the perfect teenage boy. The people around him described him as being well-mannered, intelligent, nice, and respectful. He attended Ryle High School, and along with his good grades and generally well-behaved manner, he also had gotten a part-time job working in a drive-through window at Rally's Hamburgers, where he was praised there for also being polite and being able to provide every customer with great service. But as CS got older, he was also developing a dark side about him that very few people knew about at the time. A couple of years before the murders occurred, some of the people around him noticed a few changes. He took up an extreme interest in weapons. He began collecting knives, nunchucks, Death Stars, brass knuckles, swords, and even BB guns. Which of course doesn't mean you're about to commit a quadruple homicide by any means just because you start collecting weapons, but CS had a few more subtle signs that he was heading towards a very dark path. He began stealing things from local stores, stuff he didn't even need. He gloated to some of his friends and talked about how much he enjoyed stealing. He seemed to have gotten an adrenaline rush every time he stole something from the store. Remember, he was a part of an upper middle class family. He basically got everything and anything he would have ever wanted from his parents, and yet he developed this joy of stealing from stores. CS also began frequently drinking alcohol and smoking marijuana around this time. There are also many reports indicating that he also bragged to a few of his friends that he had experimented using LSD and crack as well. As CS became more and more fascinated with weapons, he bought the Anarchist cookbook and he began making homemade pipe bombs in his free time. He apparently was so proud of his ability to make these bombs that he bragged to a couple of friends that if he wanted to, he could blow up an entire neighborhood since he knew how to make these homemade bombs. CS was spiraling into darker and darker territory and started to have an interest with very dark topics. He became obsessed with reading about the occult, vampires, Satanism, and even with death in general. He even wrote extremely disturbing papers in his creative writing class about death. Gore and death was all he ever wanted to think about. As he became more and more obsessed, he began going to church with his family less and less. CS did have a very high interest in girls like the average teenager. He did attempt to form a relationship with a crush that he had had for years, but he was ultimately rejected, and after this rejection, he began suffering from depression. The last few weeks leading up to the murders, CS continued to show signs of depression. The once academically successful student with the extremely high IQ was now beginning to fail a few of his classes. But he didn't take any responsibility when he was told that he was failing. He instead became enraged and blamed his poor grades on his teachers. He seemed to be especially angry with his English teacher. His grade had went from a B+ to a F within just a couple of months, and he did bitch to quite a few people about this. He told him that his teacher was being unfair to him. He told him how he was pissed at her because she had called his parents about how he was failing the class, and because of this, his parents had grounded him for it. And at one point, he did tell at least one friend that he did want to shoot his teacher with a gun. This friend didn't take this comment seriously and didn't tell anybody about the conversation until after the murders had already happened. This friend claimed that he didn't tell anyone because he didn't think anyone would believe him, and he never thought in a million years that his friend would actually shoot anyone. CS then later brought a stun gun to school. He didn't attempt to use it on anyone, but an assistant principal did catch him with it, and for the first time in his life, CS, being known as this modeled student, was immediately suspended and was given 50 hours of community service from the school for this infraction. For the past few months, his relationship with his parents was becoming more and more rocky as well. Walter and Becky had caught him drinking and smoking weed one night, and since the moment he was caught, he and his parents were constantly arguing with each other. So when his parents found out about his suspension from school, they were very upset with their son, and as punishment, they took away the keys to his pickup truck, his phone. They confiscated his beloved weapons collection, and they also forbade him from being able to listen to any type of heavy metal music and from using his computer. As tensions continued to rise at home, CS all of a sudden, for seemingly no reason, quit his part-time job at Rally's. He picked up his last paycheck on May 24th, 1994. While he was picking up his last check, CS was complaining to his now ex-boss about the stun gun incident at school and how he had gotten into a lot of trouble for bringing the stun gun. He also told him how upset he was at his parents for taking away his possessions. On the following day, May 25th, CS had a very disturbing conversation in hindsight with a friend named David Gardner. He casually asked David what the best way to kill someone was and if a .22 pistol could penetrate a human skull. David, in response to this question, asked him why and jokingly asked him if he was planning on killing someone or his parents. And CS replied back stating, quote, "No, but my parents are kind of just getting in the way," close quote. Later that same night, Walter, Becky, and Kristen had attended a school concert to support Lauren while she played her xylophone in the school band. This would be the last time anyone saw the family alive. The timeline for the day of their murder was confirmed by CS himself when he was interrogated after the events. On the night of May 25th, 1994, CS had set his alarm for 5 a.m. that morning. In the early morning hours, on May 26, 1994, CS had woken up to his alarm he had set at 5 a.m. He had already decided that he was going to steal some valuables from within his family's home and all the money he could find and flee from town. It was as soon as he woke up that morning that he decided that in order to not be stopped from taking these items and leaving, that he would kill his entire family. Because according to him, he did not want to be stopped by anyone. CS went outside, grabbed Walter's .380 pistol that was always kept inside of his father's car in his glove compartment, and he spent the next couple of minutes figuring out how to use this pistol. And he was able to learn how to use it pretty quickly by emptying and reloading the bullets. At approximately 5:15 a.m., he walked inside his parents' bedroom with the pistol in hand, and he aimed it to his mother, Becky's head. He then shot his 44-year-old mother once in the head, right between her eyes. With Becky being instantly killed from this gunshot, he then shot his 43-year-old father, Walter, once. CS walked out from his parents' room believing them both to be dead, and that's when he met his 14-year-old sister, Kristen, in the doorway of her bedroom. He led her back to her room, and as soon as she laid down in her bed, without any hesitation, he shot her directly in the chest, killing her. CS exited Kristen's room and was about to enter his youngest sister Lauren's bedroom when he heard some noise coming from his parents' room. So he doubled back, he re-entered his parents' room, and he saw his father Walter, who was severely injured from the initial gunshot wound, struggling to get out of his bed. CS claimed that he had gotten scared when he saw that his father was still alive, so he shot him 2 more times. This time the bullets killed him. He came back out into the hallway, and now his 12-year-old little sister had been woken up by all the gunshots, and she was standing in the hallway, probably terrified at what she had heard. CS managed to calm her down, and he led her back into her room. They had a small conversation. Lauren was telling her big brother about how she was having a very nice dream before she had been woken up from the noise. And as soon as Lauren had lied back down on her bed and closed her eyes, CS shot her on the top of her head, killing her instantly. And just like that, within a span of about 20 minutes, this 17-year-old had annihilated his entire family. He did this in a cold, ruthless, and emotionless way. By 6 a.m., CS called his best friend named Richard Brown, and he confessed to him to what he had just done to his family. Richard didn't believe what his best friend was saying, but before he really could process anything, CS hung up on him and left the house. He had taken the keys to his pickup truck, and he began driving around the town instead of disappearing like he originally planned to do that morning. He kept driving around for a while, seemingly without any sort of destination. He at one point made a stop at a small convenience store near Ryle High School and bought some juice. Once he left this convenience store, he continued to drive around, and that's when he decided to call up another friend. This time it was a female friend, and he told her that he had just killed his family. But she completely shrugged this off, didn't believe a word he said. She was just like, yeah, right, and then hung up on him. After the brief phone call, CS then drove to the home of Danielle Bush. She was CS's prom date just a few weeks before. She had went to a completely different high school than him and had just started her summer vacation break. When Danielle opened the door, CS grabbed her arm with one hand and pulled out the loaded pistol with the other, pointed it at her, and instructed her to get into his pickup truck quietly. And Danielle, being smart, did what she was told. Once in his car, CS then immediately drove them to Ryle High School. When they arrived to the school, CS put the gun inside his pants to hide it and took Danielle to his first period trigonometry class in room 203, led by his teacher Carol Kanabrowski. The classroom held 22 students between the ages of 16 and 17 years old. He entered the classroom at 8:35 a.m., which was 5 minutes after the class had already started. As soon as CS walked into the class late with this unknown girl beside him, Carol Kanabrowski asked her student for an explanation. CS calmly told her to lock the door. She asked him why, and he said very matter-of-fact that a student had gone crazy and was holding a class hostage. As he said this, he pulled the gun out from his pants and waved it in the air to show everyone that he was carrying a gun. After the door was locked, he sat down at his teacher's desk, and Danielle herself sat down at a desk near the front of the classroom. Still waving his gun in the air, cocking it back nonchalantly, he basically told the 24 hostages that he was going to sit there for a while and told them to continue on with class as normal. I can't imagine what everyone in that room was thinking about at that moment. Some of the students sat there quietly and continued working on their schoolwork. Others were sobbing, scared shitless, all of them thinking about what CS was going to do next. But the entire class tried their best to carry on as normal, Carol Kanabrowski was walking around slowly, answering students' questions they had about trigonometry. At one point, she asked CS what she could do to help him, and he just told her not to bother him again, and she didn't dare to ask him again after that. After a few minutes, a senior student knocked on the door of room 203 to ask Carol Kanabrowski to sign an absence form for her. CS allowed her to answer the door, and while she was talking to the student, still remaining calm, she mouthed the words, "He has a gun," to the student. The student immediately relayed this information to the front office of the school to Assistant Principal Steve Sorrell, who then contacted the police. An announcement was then made on the school's intercom system stating that there was an emergency situation and students began their lockdown protocol. At 8:48 a.m., Steve Sorrell knocked on the door of classroom 203. He asked CS if he could come out of the room and talk to him, but CS refused to come out. He told Steve Sorrell that he wanted to remain in the classroom. Steve then courageously bargained with CS and told him that he would come into the classroom and stay with him to talk to him if he let the other students and his teacher leave. Incredibly, CS agreed to this, and Steve Sorrell walked into the classroom as the 24 hostages proceeded to leave the room and made it safely to the cafeteria. Now, with just 2 people inside the classroom, Steve Sorrell asked calmly for CS to hand over his gun to him, but initially CS refused to do so. A couple of minutes later, a police officer named Pete Shirlow came to the door of room 203, and he reached down for his gun. CS was able to see him reaching for his gun, and it was in that moment that he willingly handed over his gun to Steve Sorrell. This ended the ordeal at 8:52 a.m. A total of 17 minutes of uncertainty, and then it was over. Every single person who was there in that classroom was extremely lucky. This 17-year-old kid who had just murdered his entire family could have easily started shooting at anyone in that classroom. Any little thing could have set him off, and there could have been more casualties. But thank God things did not go down that way. CS was then escorted out of the school building in cuffs and taken into custody. The commander of the Boone County Sheriff's Department, Jeff Martin, interviewed CS, who then openly admitted to killing his mom, dad, and his 2 sisters. Upon hearing him confess to murdering his family, Martin sent officers to the Shrout's home where the 4 bodies were discovered. 6 shell casings were recovered in total. They also collected a variety of items CS had owned, including his many weapons, 6 marijuana cigarettes, and a book called The Complete of Spells, Ceremonies, and Magic. CS was asked by Commander Martin why he had killed his family, and CS told him that he resented his parents for taking away his weapons as punishment. He explained that he was fine with them taking away his truck and his phone because they had purchased those items and therefore had the right to take those away from him, but they did not have the right to take away his beloved weapons collection he had purchased himself. He also described his rocky relationship with his parents. He claimed he always became frustrated whenever he was around his mom, Becky, stating he could never get along with her. He also mentioned that him and his father Walter had an okay relationship, but he did resent both of his parents for making certain decisions about CS's life. He explained to Jeff Martin that his parents had already decided that he was going to go to college from the moment he was born, and that they had also made him take the advanced placement classes in school. He believed that his parents had already decided the course of his life before he even had the chance to choose for himself, and he had a lot of anger towards them for that. But this didn't explain why CS also murdered his 2 sisters, as he had no resentment towards them. When he was asked why he had also killed his sisters, he told Jeff Martin that there were 2 reasons why he killed Kristen and Lauren. The first reason was he claimed that Kristen was smart enough to contact the police and he did not want to be stopped by anyone. And the second reason was he didn't want them to live without their parents. All of the reasons why CS claimed to have murdered his family are extremely petty reasons. If everyone went by these reasons as an excuse to annihilate their entire family, then everyone would be killing their family members. I don't like using the phrase that some people just snap, but honestly, that's what it seems like happened in this case. CS slowly became fascinated with dark elements and themes, and he clearly suffered from some sort of mental illness, not only depression. When he was answering these questions, Jeff Martin was very disturbed by how emotionless and how matter-of-fact he was when talking about murdering his own family. He believed that CS was a very evil person for what he had done.
Sisters.
Well, the first thing he said to me was, "I've had a bad day today." So I said, "Oh yeah?" And he said, "Yeah, I've killed my whole family."
Jeff Martin arrived at Ryle High School that morning right behind Pete Shirlow, who saw Assistant Principal Steve Sorrell snatch the gun from Shrout's hand. Gun drawn, Shirlow had barked, "Hand over that gun right now." Years later, he learned Sorrell never even knew Shirlow was there.
Mr. Sherrill was able to talk to him and able to get the kids out of the classroom. Amazing that the bravery that he showed trying to get the gun.
A Colt Mustang 380. Shrout is now 41, held at the Kentucky State Penitentiary. And a quarter century later, the motivation continues to haunt.
He had been found with a stun gun a couple of weeks prior to this at the school and was being disciplined for that. And he was upset about that.
His parents had taken his driving privileges away.
And the reason he said he killed his sisters is that he didn't want them to grow up without the parents. He was 17 at the time. He was an extremely intelligent kid. His IQ was 161. I think he felt somewhat inadequate. He wanted to compensate by his slight nerdiness by wearing black and carrying Death Stars and nunchucks and that kind of thing. And I think that probably is what led up to him doing what he did.
CS was charged for 4 counts of first-degree murder, as well as abduction and holding 24 people hostage in the classroom. CS pled guilty for reason of insanity, and as part of his plea deal, the charges for the abduction and hostage situation were completely dropped, and so he would avoid the death penalty. Since CS pled guilty, there was no trial, and the judge accepted his guilty plea, and also declared that CS was mentally ill. His defense team had psychiatric tests done on CS, however, what had been confirmed based off of these tests were ordered to be sealed by the court and are not accessible to the public. On October 14, 1994, CS, still at 17 years old, was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. When he turned 18 years old, he was transferred to the Kentucky Department of Corrections. For the next 10 years in prison, CS had accumulated 29 pages of infractions and disciplinary actions that he had made since behind bars in the 4 facilities that he had been incarcerated in since 1995. Some of his infractions were he at one point was caught in possession with a 10-inch L-shaped stainless steel bar that he was going to use in an escape plan that he had come up with. In another incident, he had made a knife and had carved several knife marks onto the wall of his cell. After a while in prison, his behavior did eventually begin to improve. He learned skills such as carpentry and car repair, and he also began helping other inmates completing their GEDs. In the early 2000s, CS found his way back to Christianity and has openly stated that if he is ever released, then members of the church who run an inmate program were willing to help him. Most recently, in March of 2019, due to CS's good behavior, he became eligible for parole for the first time at the age of 42. During this meeting with 2 members of the parole board, CS had revealed for the first time that allegedly his mother, Becky Shrout, had sexually abused him as a child. He stated, quote, "My mother had sexually abused me when I was younger. I don't want you to think that I'm using that as an excuse or as justifications, but that is what happened." Close quote. I want to make it very clear that there is no proof that Becky Shrout had ever abused her son. CS also claimed that his father Walter knew about the abuse but did nothing to stop it. He also revealed that after he had murdered his family, the reason why he had went to Ryle High School afterwards was because he had hoped that the police would shoot him and kill him after taking his classroom hostage. After an hour of questioning at the end of the meeting, CS was asked if he deserved to be paroled, and he responded by saying, quote, "I don't think I deserve to be alive. I don't mean that in a weird, suicidal way. I hate what happened, and I hate the way my life had turned out. It started out bad, and it got worse. I made it worse. I don't like the word deserve because I still don't feel okay about what I've done." Close quote. CS was denied parole, and he will not be eligible again until May of 2029. Jeff Martin believes that CS should never be released from prison. He describes CS as pure evil and doesn't deserve to ever walk free for what he had done to Walter, Becky, Kristen, and Lauren Shrout. Cases like this are very interesting to me. I don't have any idea how anyone could ever intentionally murder another human being, let alone their own family. It's a very strange concept to think about how Walter and Becky Shrout had conceived, birthed, and raised their own murderer. It's a very horrific situation, and it doesn't make a lot of sense how a smart young man who was lucky enough to have been born with every opportunity available to him took the lives of his parents and his younger sisters and ruined his entire life because, in his own words, he resented his parents for taking away his weapons and was also upset that they planned out his life by expecting him to go to college. And then he kills his baby sisters just because he didn't want them to have to live without their parents. Make it make sense. I sincerely hope that CS never gets approved for parole. I agree with Jeff Martin. He is an unpredictable person suffering from some sort of illness, and I don't believe he is truly remorseful for what he had done to his family. And if he is ever released, he is without a doubt capable of committing murder again. Only time will tell if CS will ever walk free again. But that is all I have on today's case. If you enjoyed, please like, share, and subscribe. Please comment down below your thoughts about this case. I would love to see what you all think. But that is it for me. I'll see you guys next time with case number 17. Bye, True Crimers.